Hey, what's going on, everybody? Brent Hyden here, coming at you on this Monday morning, talking tonight's 9-game slate around the association. Before we dig into the slate, quick reminder, make sure you hit that subscribe button down below. That way you will get notified anytime that I post a new breakdown video. Also, make sure you're hitting that thumbs up button if you like the content that I am producing. Goes a long way to helping with search engine optimization and all that good stuff. If you did happen to stumble across this video and you are not already following me on Twitter or subscribed to my content and projection package, make sure you hit that follow button on the Twitter machine. My Twitter handle at BrentHyden1 is in the description down below. While you're doing that, make sure you send me a message to find out how you can get access for a very affordable one-time price. But without further ado, let's go ahead and dig in to the first game of the night. We're going to talk about Miami-Detroit here first. Detroit 5.5-point favorites, 219.5 over under for this one. Some injury news to talk about. Whiteside is questionable. Goran Dragic is questionable. Reggie Bullock is listed as doubtful for this game. So that's going to open things up a decent amount if injury news happens to fall the way that we want. I'm going to knock out Detroit first just because they're a little bit easier to talk about tonight. Over on FanDuel, if we're talking this game here from a just roster construction standpoint, I think Blake Griffin is one of the better power forward options on the slate at 9,400. Power forward, just not a great spot tonight where I'm just super happy about a whole lot of the plays. 9,800 over on DraftKings. I'm going to be looking elsewhere. There's just a lot of other multi-position eligible players that I like a little bit more than Blake at that price tag. But again, over on FanDuel, not a whole lot to really like. And I think this is a decent spot for Blake here, regardless of what happens with Whiteside. We've seen the usage has been really high for him. The production has been really good. So I like Blake a significant amount over on FanDuel. Probably going to be a fade outside of some tournaments for me on DraftKings. Same thing goes for Andre Drummond. If Whiteside is out, Andre Drummond becomes a guy that I'm going to be trying to force in my lineups just because he's going to feast on top of like Bam Adebayo and Kelly Olynyk, whatever center they try to roll out in Miami. But right now, as it stands, if Whiteside plays, Drummond just a GPP option, I think, on both sides for me. The rest of Detroit, I will say over on DraftKings and I guess on FanDuel too, where small forward is kind of terrible. Stanley Johnson, 4,600 over on FanDuel. He is 3,700 on DraftKings. He's going to be interesting. I think he's going to get a decent amount of minutes with Reggie Bullock potentially not playing in this game. And one of the weaknesses that Miami has this season is against corner threes. Opponents are shooting 48% from the corners against Miami on the season. And Stanley Johnson, 20% of all of his field goal attempts are corner threes. He's a guy sometimes hesitant to shoot, but he's a guy that could fall into, a couple block steals. Also, some extra three-pointers. If he gets 30 plus minutes tonight in this spot, like I actually have a decent amount of interest in him as a value option. And on FanDuel, 4,600. I think he's someone that you can lump into that, drop your score format strategy there. So he's someone that I think I'm going to consider a little bit in this spot. Ish Smith at 4,300, very appealing price tag here against a Miami team that has struggled against the pick and roll. And if you look at Ish Smith, he's operating in the pick and roll a decent amount so far this season. Pulling up his numbers right now, Ish Smith, 49.4% of his possessions this season come in the pick and roll as the ball handler. Miami, 0.91 points per possession allowed to the ball handler in the pick and roll. Also interesting, 34% of his field goal attempts actually come at the rim. Opponents are shooting over 70%, no, 60% against Miami at the rim. So decent spot, I think, for Ish Smith. So I kind of like him a little bit in cash, but there's going to be another guy that we're going to talk about that I think is going to be a little bit better option. Moving on to the Miami side of things, Whiteside's questionable. If he were to sit out this game, that's going to mean a lot of run for Bam Adebayo at the 5. I have a significant amount of interest in him at that current price tag of 4,300 over on DraftKings and 3,800 on FanDuel, just because Detroit's a team that has struggled at the rim. Opponents shooting 70% at the rim against them this season. Bam Adebayo, 79% of his shots come at the rim. So Bam Adebayo, a guy would be really, really tough to get away from in this spot if we get news that Whiteside is out. So some news to keep an eye on there. I absolutely love Whiteside at 7,800 over on DraftKings. If he plays, 8,600 is going to be a fade for me over on FanDuel. But that $7,800 price tag against a Detroit team that, again, we've seen struggle against big men at times this season, I have a lot of interest in him there. I mentioned if Whiteside is out, Kelly Olynyk could see some minutes at the 5. We would probably see that starting lineup get shuffled around a little bit too. But Olynyk, without Whiteside on the floor, dating back to last season, 1.17 fantasy points per minute, 24.6% usage rate. So definitely someone to look at there. With Dragic being questionable, if he sits, Winslow and Josh Richardson, two guys really, really solid options here. Richardson, 23% usage rate and almost a fantasy point per minute dating back to last season. Winslow, 20% usage rate and 0.93 fantasy points per minute without Dragic on the floor. 5,200 for Winslow and 5,500. Two very, very, very fine options here. I actually don't hate Winslow regardless of the status of Dragic, but obviously gets a pretty big boost there. Dwayne Wade, still a lot of usage off the bench, someone that I would be continuing to go back to at 5K on DraftKings and 53 on FanDuel. If Whiteside and Dragic both sit out, Kelly Olynyk would be someone that I would definitely be looking at. 25% usage rate, 1.20 fantasy points per minute with both of those guys off the floor. Tyler Johnson, again, a good cash punt, but we saw last game coming off the bench alongside Dwayne Wade's going to hurt his usage a little bit, but at 4,500, you don't need a ton out of him to put up anything. And if Dragic plays, I think you can roll him out in tournaments against the Pistons. Moving on to a more appealing game, Houston at Indiana. Indiana, 1-point favorite in this one, 212 over under. Eric Gordon is going to sit out. It's going to be a lot of minutes for CP3, Harden. Carmelo's going to pick up a few extra minutes. Capella, Tucker, all going to pick up a few extra minutes just as a byproduct of Eric Gordon's, 28, 30 minutes being out of the lineup. Chris Paul, 8,400 on DraftKings. Over on FanDuel, 8,500. I think he's fine. Cash games and tournaments. Obviously, we know the usage does take a little bit of a hit with James Harden being back, but I still really like Chris Paul in this spot. Still going to get a lot of field goal attempts, still going to get some of those assist opportunities, can notch some of those steals, things like that. So I like Chris Paul in this spot. I'm going to be looking elsewhere in cash, I think, but in tournaments, I definitely do like the idea of taking a shot on Chris Paul. James Harden at 10-7, going to draw a little bit of OLADIPO defense, and that does concern me just a touch, but at 10-7, that's just ridiculously cheap over on DraftKings for James Harden. So tough fade for me there, but I think I'm going to lean towards Westbrook, which we'll get to a little bit later. 11-1 on FanDuel. I'm perfectly fine with that price. It's a good spot, again, for him here. The rest of Houston, I do really like Clint Capella at 7,700. A little tough to get him in my lineups. 8,200, very, very good price for him there. Indiana has been better against centers this season. They've been better on the boards this season, and that is a little bit concerning, but I do still think that Clint Capella can easily get on top of that salary tonight. Really, really tough to ignore him in this matchup, but the rest of the guys, PJ Tucker, 4,600, still going to play a lot of minutes. That's appealing. Carmelo Anthony in tournaments. I would still lean towards Tucker as a good cash option here. Looking at the Indiana side of things, this is where I actually have the most interest tonight. That starts with Victor Oladipo, 8,200 DraftKings. Yeah, I'm just he's like one of the first guys in my lineup tonight. There's just no way that I'm gonna fade Victor Oladipo at 8,200 on DraftKings, 9,100 on FanDuel. A little tougher. I'm still gonna have a lot of interest in Victor Oladipo. He's just been playing really, really well. We know he's gonna get like right around 30+% usage. Gonna have opportunities to produce. I mean, look at these field goal attempts: 18, 19, 18, 24, 15, 12, 23, 20, 23. Like, if he's going to be taking 18, 19, 20 plus shot attempts against a Houston defense that has not been great this season, 111.3 defensive rating, that's pretty appealing. And I just don't see how Oladipo just doesn't crush his $8,200 salary tonight. So Victor Oladipo, a core option for me on DraftKings and a very, very good option in all formats on DK or on FanDuel. Sorry. Looking at the guard situation, Darren Collison continues to be underpriced. Minutes are a little bit of concern, but I'm still comfortable with him at that $4,500 price tag in cash. 5,300 on FanDuel. I'm probably going to be looking elsewhere. I don't hate Corey Joseph as a punt option on FanDuel or DraftKings. We've seen him be able to fall into good value from time to time. So coming off a stretch of really, really bad games, but Corey Joseph, someone you can definitely consider. Looking at one guy I actually do like a significant amount. I was on Tyreke Evans last game. I'm not going back to the well there, but BOJAN Bogdanovic, guy, last couple games has not played a lot of, played the normal amount of minutes that we expect out of him. Okay, so we'll get to the Thad Young news that just came out, but Bogdanovic, a guy I think could be in a pretty good spot here tonight. Houston really struggling against corner threes. 14% of Bogdanovic's shots are corner 3-point attempts. That makes him really appealing in this spot. Like, I think at 4,400 on DraftKings, great tournament option, and at 4,700 on FanDuel at a small forward position that's not terribly appealing. He's someone that I'm going to have a decent amount of exposure to in cash and tournaments. Thad Young is now questionable with an illness. I had a lot of interest in Thad Young before that news came out. If he's healthy and is going to play, I have a lot of interest in Thad Young. 51% of his shots come at the rim this season. Opponents are shooting 70% at the rim against Houston. Their switching defense has just been terrible. They're going to continue to do it. And guys just aren't communicating very well on those switches, and it's allowing a lot of opportunities at the rim for opponents. As I mentioned, 51% of Thad's shots come at the rim. I have a ton of interest in Thad Young, just way too cheap at 5,200 on DraftKings. What is he? 61 on FanDuel. Would be someone that I'd be a little bit more hesitant to play in that spot, but I like him a lot. And then we have to look at Sabonis and Miles Turner. Houston getting destroyed again at the rim, 69.4% opponent shooting there, but against the roll man in the pick and roll, 1.48 points per possession allowed. We know that Sabonis is a very good, very, very good roll man in the pick and roll. 31% of his possessions so far this season come in the pick and roll. 40% of Miles Turner's possessions come in the pick and roll. I know these guys are going to be splitting a lot of their minutes, and I know Miles Turner has not been great in a lot of these games this season. Minutes sometimes up in the air, but 5,100 on DraftKings. I can't get away from that price. 5,100 is just way too cheap for Miles Turner in this spot. 5,800 still very tough to get away from in this spot. I have a lot of interest in Miles Turner at 5,800, and Sabonis at 6K in tournaments. Very, very solid price for Sabonis at 6K. 5,900, very solid price there as well. So I am fine with either one of those guys. I am leaning towards Turner and cash and Sabonis in tournaments. Moving on, Cleveland, Orlando. This game's pretty easy. Orlando 3.5 or 3-point favorites, 212 over under. If you're playing anyone from Cleveland, it's Tristan Thompson and like Jordan Clarkson in tournaments, Larry Nance in tournaments, and that's pretty much it. This entire team is a massive shit show. Yeah, just yeah. Orlando is where I actually have some interest here. Cleveland's giving up 117.9 points per game. All of Orlando is in play here. Starting at point guard, DJ Augustin, 4,100, coming off a solid outing here. Cash games for sure. GPPs, yes, please. I'm going to continue to love some DJ Augustin. And without Jonathan Isaac in this game, like you're going to get a little bit of a boost for Augustin, actually. Let me pull it up. He actually sees 0.92 fantasy points per minute, 18.1% usage rate, which isn't great. But like there's still, I mean, that equates to about an extra two fantasy points per 36 minutes. At 4,100, this guy's going to get you 20 plus fantasy points most nights. I'll take that all day long. Aaron Gordon at 6,500. Yes, please. I'm gonna take that all day long as well. He's a little less appealing on DraftKings or on FanDuel. Sorry, DraftKings 6,500. FanDuel a little less appealing at his $7,300 price tag. Coming off a really good game. He's another guy that actually gets a decent boost with Jonathan Isaac off the floor, dating back to last season. 24% usage rate, 1.16 fantasy points per minute. That's a pretty big boost. Like Isaac being there eats into some of the usage and field goal attempts for him, but almost plus 5 fantasy points per 36 minutes without Isaac on the floor. Dating back to last season, that's really, really solid. I love Aaron Gordon in the spot. Should just absolutely smash his salary. Without Isaac there, I'm completely fine going with Evan Fournier. Continues to be, I think he's second on the team in usage now, but still right around 25-26% usage rate. Perfectly fine in all formats. Vucevic, 8,700. Really tough to pay up that price, but he's a guy in tournaments I would have a lot of exposure to as well. We know he has the 60-70 fantasy point upside, so I like Vooch in tournaments as well. And then I think it's going to be one of these spots where I'm okay with Mo Bamba as like a punt option. Obviously coming off a really solid outing against the Spurs. The biggest issue is we're just not going to get a lot of minutes out of him. Like 24 is going to be like his minutes ceiling, I think. But with the production that he can put up in a very limited amount of time against a very, very, very bad Cleveland defense, yeah, I like him a decent amount. And then we can still go back to Terrence Ross. Jonathan Simmons actually profiles as a really solid value option. I'm looking right now at 4,200. He's a guy I would be potentially punting with here on FanDuel, but he profiles as someone obviously not really, really high upside, but I think he's someone that we can look at as a value option here, just given how he matches up with the Cleveland team. Chicago at New York. This game is appealing to me on one side and not as appealing on the other. And it kind of just depends on what happens with Tim Hardaway Jr., who is questionable for this game. I'll knock out the Knicks first for this. Knicks favored by 3, 216 over under. If Tim Hardaway Jr. plays, I don't really want to pay 7,600 for him in this spot. What is he over on? 7,900. That's going to be a hard pass on FanDuel for sure. Maybe some tournaments, maybe a sprinkle in tournaments, that's fine. But if he misses this game, you're going to get a lot of usage and shots that are going to open up for the Knicks. And against the Bulls defense, giving up 114.5 defensive rating, Yeah, I'm going to be all over Knicks, a lot of the Knicks in this spot. Damian Dotson, regardless of Tim Hardaway Jr., a guy that I have just a ton of interest in at 4,900 over on DraftKings, 5,600 on FanDuel. Would be even more interested in him if Hardaway Jr. sits, but even at that $4,900 price tag on DraftKings, very tough to get away from. We saw Mario actually get some run last game against Washington whenever Tim Hardaway Jr. Was sidelined. He has a 35.5% usage rate and 1.11 fantasy points per minute without Tim Hardaway Jr. on the floor. I absolutely hate Mario Hezonja. I think he is a terrible basketball player. He just makes really, really dumb decisions with his shot selection and the way that he handles things. Like, he'll pass up a wide open 3-point look just to dribble twice and then take a contested 3-pointer, or he'll be like standing just inside the 3-point line, catch a pass and spot up instead of just taking one step back and then shooting the 3. He'll just take it like a semi-contested long 2. Dude just makes terrible decisions, but he's going to be mega chalk at 3,400 if Tim Hardaway Jr. misses. What is he over on FanDuel? 3,600. Yeah, he's going to be super mega chalk, and I'm fine with eating the chalk in this spot if Tim Hardaway Jr. misses. FanDuel, I would probably just use him as one of your punt values in this spot. Frank Ntilikina, still too cheap on DraftKings at 4,300. Gonna pass on FanDuel because he's up in the 5Ks there. Alonzo Trier, 4,200. I really wish he wasn't point guard only on DraftKings, but he's someone to consider. He's 3,900, someone definitely to consider over on FanDuel with Tim Hardaway Jr. potentially missing this game. Just going to be extra minutes, extra shots all around for everybody. So Alonzo Trier could put up a pretty solid outing here. Noah Vonleh struggled with foul trouble in back-to-back games. We've seen some minutes for Robinson at the 4 alongside Cantor, but I'm still fine with Vonleh in a revenge game. There's that. In a revenge game against the Bulls. The Bulls, again, just really, really bad. Bad rebounding team. Bad interior defense. Bad rim protection. I do like Noah Vonleh in all formats here. The same thing with Mitchell Robinson. I expect him to be somewhat popular here, but it is a pretty good spot. Again, I mentioned the Bulls' really bad rebounding team. 47.1 rebounds allowed so far in the season. Mitchell Robinson at 4,400. I think more of a tournament option for me, but we know he has monster upside. Foul trouble, always a concern, but going up against like a dominant big man like Wendell Carter Jr., I'm a little less concerned than I am, as he was going up against Dwight Howard and DeAndre Jordan. I like Mitchell Robinson a lot. What is he over on FanDuel? 4,900. That's a pretty good price for him there. So I'm fine with that. In his Cantor and tournaments, monster numbers whenever he's getting, some run. 6,200 on DraftKings. Very, very good tournament play there. I would definitely sprinkle in some Cantor and tournaments for sure. Looking at Chicago side of things, Levine still 76 or 8K finally. Monster usage, we know it's going to be there. I like him in all formats, but I'm going to be looking elsewhere. Like, give me OLADIPO at 8,200 over Levine at 8K. Like, that's an easy decision for me there. 8,300, it's a little less of an easy decision. Oh man, hang on. All this news coming in right as I'm recording. Hassan Whiteside is out. Goran Dragic will play. So, hello, Bam Adebayo, chalk day. Yeah. Back to the Bulls. Jabari Parker. Usage goes down when he's sharing the floor with Levine, and that's definitely concerning. I don't think people are taking that into consideration, but 5,700 over on DraftKings, perfectly fine. 6,600 hard pass. Same thing goes with Wendell Carter Jr. over on DraftKings, 6,100, still a touch too cheap. FanDuel, power forward eligible only. Hard pass at his price. New Orleans OKC. OKC 4.5-point favorites in this one. 238.5 or 238 over under. Russell Westbrook 11.1K. I'm smashing that lock button. I am always team like balanced lineups. I hardly ever mash in a stud, but 11-1 Russell Westbrook in a game with a projected total almost 240 points. Goran Dragic expected to play. So yeah, almost 240 point total. Very fast paced game. Like both these teams playing just super fast. Both of these 107.6, 107.7 pace. League average is 104. Yeah. Like Pelicans 120.6 points allowed per game to opponents. I'm hitting that lock button on Russell tonight. Like we have not gotten the monster Westbrook game. 60, 65, 70 fantasy points. It's going to happen soon. Like it was going to happen in this Washington game, but he only played 26 minutes. Like this game is going to stay close, or it should stay close. Yeah. The interesting thing with Westbrook, and this makes him a very good FanDuel play, he's recorded at least 3 steals in each of the last 4 contests. I don't think people are going to realize that. So I love Russell Westbrook in this spot. I still love Jeremy Grant. Pelicans struggle against corner threes. Opponents are shooting 45% from the corners against the Pelicans. Jeremy Grant, really good shooting that corner three. 11% of his field goal attempts are corner threes. I love Jeremy Grant in the spot. 4,400, 4,900. Cash games, tournaments. This is just a really good spot for him. Going to play a ton of minutes here, so I like Jeremy Grant a significant amount. If you're not playing Russell Westbrook, you definitely probably want to get some exposure to Paul George. 8,800 on DraftKings. Cash tournaments for sure. Over on FanDuel, 9,600. Probably cash games only, just because I don't think you're going to get a ceiling game out of George. But getting some exposure to OKC through him or Russ is definitely a good idea. I would not pair the two of them together. If you're wanting to pair Russ with somebody not named Jeremy Grant, I think Steven Adams is your guy. Pelicans giving up a decent amount of points in the paint and decent amount of second chance points. We know Steven Adams, one of the best defense or offensive rebounders in the NBA. 76% of his field goal attempts come at the rim, 24% at in the paint. So literally all of his field goal attempts are either in the paint or at the rim against a team that has struggled in the paint and at the rim. Yeah, Steven Adams, too cheap at 6,800. I really like pairing him with Russell Westbrook where you can do it. And even at 7,200, absolutely love the spot for him here. You can use Abrinas in tournaments, not cash really. I'm okay with him on FanDuel as your punt option. He does have, a particularly high upside. We saw, 27 fantasy points. Minutes have been decent for him. I like him a decent amount. And then Dennis Schroeder, a guy is going to be super popular. 5,500, I'm okay with rolling him out in cash. In tournaments, I'm probably looking elsewhere. Minutes a little bit inflated last game, where there was, some blowouts, where there was a blowout, but I'm closer to this like 24, 25 minute projection here, but just the role he has, he's going to take a lot of shots in a very fast-paced game. I like Abrinas or Schroeder a decent amount where you can afford him. Looking at the Pelicans, it's a little concerning that Anthony Davis isn't shooting very much. He's expected to suit up in this one, but that elbow seems to be really, really bothering him. Tournaments only for me. Like I'm 100% going to go Russ over Anthony Davis for almost the exact same price. Mirotic seems to be like a lock for like 40 plus almost every single night. I'm fine getting exposure to him in all formats, especially on like DraftKings at that $8,100 price tag. 84 on FanDuel, I'm still okay with that there. I like Etuan Moore as a value option, way to get exposure to this game. just going to play a decent amount of minutes. OKC's transition defense has not been great. Etuan Moore, 25% of his possessions are in transition this season, so I'm fine with him in all formats. Julius Randle, you're really only looking at if Davis is out. Minutes are still going to be right around that 26. Like, he seems to be pretty much hard capped right around that 26-minute mark, so you're only really looking at him if he's going to get, extra opportunities for rebounds and things like that with Davis being out. So not really high on him here. And I do love Jrue Holiday pretty much in all formats. 8,300 over on DraftKings, 8,600 over on FanDuel. Someone that is very, very interesting to me here. Moving on to a game where I have almost no interest, Boston at Denver. Two really, really good defenses. Denver 2.5-point favorites, 206 over under. When I say two really, really good defenses, Celtics giving up 99.8 points per game. Denver Nuggets 101.9 points per game. Just not a whole lot to really like here. Kyrie Irving at 7,700 on both sides is pretty much the only thing that has any appeal to me. But if you were to sprinkle in some like Jason Tatum or Al Horford in some of your tournament lineups, like, I'm fine with that. Morris continues to crush off the bench. His price is starting to climb. But over on FanDuel at, I know he's cheap over here, 5,400. I'm still okay if you want to roll him out in all formats over there. But over on DraftKings at 5,800, I'm going to be looking elsewhere. On the Denver side of things, Celtics actually struggling on the boards. 48.4 rebounds per game allowed. That's going to give, Millsap and Jokic a little bit of a boost, but these guys are only tournaments for me. Jokic at 9,400. He could have a monster upside game in this spot, or he could just come out and give you like 38, 40 fantasy points. I'm going to be looking elsewhere for sure, especially with Whiteside being out now. Like, I'd rather pay 86 for Drummond. It's just an easy decision there for me. So moving on to another game that's not terribly appealing. Toronto at Utah. Toronto 2-point favorites, 215.5 over under. Kawhi is questionable. Donovan Mitchell is out. Alec Burks is probable. Raul Neto is out for this game. I don't think it's a lock that Kawhi plays in this one. News came out early last week that, Kawhi was going to rest one of the halves of this back-to-back, either LA or Utah. That was before he actually had a foot injury. Now I think there's a little bit of concern that, at least for me, that Kawhi sits this game out. Hopefully we get that news early enough to do anything with it. If he sits, that's going to make Kyle Lowry and Pascal Siakam very, very interesting, even in a somewhat unappealing matchup. Obviously, we know Siakam's minutes are going to be up with Kawhi Leonard out. It just shortens that rotation a little bit. I would definitely be going back to the well with Siakam if Kawhi Leonard is out. If Kawhi Leonard plays, I'm kind of off the majority of this team, at least on FanDuel. If you're looking on FanDuel, like, they're a touch overpriced, 8,300, 5,100, Kawhi at 10-1, Serge at 65, Siakam at 55. Like, none of those prices are terribly appealing. Jonas Valanciunas at 61, love him in tournaments here. But, like, going on the DraftKings side of things, outside of Lowry, everyone is significantly cheaper. Like, Danny Green, if Kawhi Leonard plays, I would get some tournament exposure to Danny Green. Like, he would be, if you're building 150 lineups, I would have 20% of Danny Green, just because we know the upside is there with Kawhi Leonard in the lineup. Serge Ibaka, 5,500. I'm fine with that price in all formats. Just a guy that's playing really, really well. And then again, I mentioned Siakam. Pretty much only in play for me if Kawhi sits. Jonas Valanciunas, 5,300. I think, especially on DraftKings, I think he's probably the nuts tournament option in this spot. Utah really struggling against big men early on this season, especially post-up big men. They are giving up 1.04 points per possession on post-ups. this season. Jonas Valanciunas, 12% of his possessions come in the post as post-ups, 3.3 points per game. He ranks in the 100th percentile. He's one of the most efficient post-up bigs in the NBA. Serge Ibaka, 12.8% of his possessions, but 6.3 points per game. He's just not very efficient, ranks in the 21st percentile. It's going to be a big boost for both these guys. I'm definitely okay with either one. I think Valanciunas could see a few extra minutes in this spot, so that has me intrigued at his really cheap price of 5,300. If we get the 22, 24 minutes out of him, he has a monster ceiling in this spot. So I would definitely be looking at some Jonas Valanciunas in tournaments. And again, Siakam, Ibaka, fine option all formats. Siakam if Kawhi sits. I'm going to hop over to Memphis at Golden State. Golden State 14-point favorites, 220 over under. Chandler Parsons is out. JaMychal Green is out. Omri Caspi is questionable. Sean Livingston not going to suit up for this one. I don't have a lot of appeal in this game outside of, like, if you want to sprinkle in some Steph Curry, Kevin Durant in tournaments, I'm fine with that. Draymond Green in cash, I'm completely fine with at 7,400 over on DraftKings, but I'm going to be looking elsewhere at 8,300 on FanDuel. He's not a core option. He's not someone I'm locking in my lineups like I have whenever he's been 6,700, 6,900, but someone you can definitely go with in cash. Golden State's just, they're sprinkles of tournaments. It's just not a great spot. Like, I'd rather look elsewhere than those guys outside of, again, tournament lineups only. I do have some interest in Memphis. Like, Memphis, over the past couple seasons, there have been a couple of blowout games, but, like, Memphis has been really banged up in a lot of these outings, and there's been some where they've played Golden State really, really, really well. I think looking at, like, Mike Conley and Marc Gasol in tournaments is completely fine. I'm okay with Mike Conley at 7,800 in cash. 8K tournaments on FanDuel, but 7,800, I'm okay with that in cash on FanDuel or on DraftKings. The guys that I had the most interest in, I love Shelvin Mack in this spot. Has been playing just ridiculously well, getting a lot of minutes alongside Mike Conley. We know these teams can go small. There's a lot of, like, guard lineups for both these teams. I love Shelvin Mack, 4,200 over on FanDuel, 4,500 on DraftKings. Good spot for him. And the same goes for Garrett Temple, 4,700. Going to get a decent amount of minutes as long as this game stays close. Going to match up really well with Klay Thompson. Coming off a couple down games, but 4,700 for Garrett Temple in what should be a pace-up matchup for the Grizzlies. Warriors really, really struggle in transition. 25% of Temple's possessions are in transition this season. Is getting out and running, shooting a decent amount. I love Garrett Temple in this spot. Yeah, that covers that game. Minnesota and Clippers. Oh, Minnesota. I am not going to go near Minnesota in this spot outside of some Karl Anthony Towns if Jimmy Butler sits this game out. I can't recommend that you roll Tyus Jones, who has been scratched post lock. I can't recommend Derrick Rose, who has been probable, questionable, available to play, then a freaking late scratch. Like, if Jeff Teague suits up, which I don't know if he's going to, he's interesting at that $4,800 price tag in tournaments on DraftKings. Don't go near him on FanDuel. These guards, like, I can't do it. Like, if you want to sprinkle some in tournaments, feel free, but I cannot in my right mind tell you to play anyone, because there's just absolutely no telling if they're actually going to play at this point with what Tibbs has been doing. That may be terrible advice, but yeah, I'm just not going to recommend playing these guys. And it's not like they're super cheap, like Tyus Jones at 5,400. I just don't like it. Josh Okogie is perfectly fine at 4,500. He would be the only guy that, like, I feel comfortable in if Jimmy Butler is out. Be it. And then Towns, who we know is going to get a monster usage boost without Jimmy Butler, against a Clippers team that has not been great against centers. Yeah, that's all I can really say. Like Andrew Wiggins in tournaments, sure, but like I had much more appeal in the Clippers side of this game. Clippers really struggle against stretch fours and wings. That makes Danilo Gallinari at 6,300 super intriguing. 6,300 for Danilo Gallinari, just way too cheap. And on FanDuel, where I've mentioned a couple times, small forward is really ugly, 6,900. I have a ton of interest in Danilo Gallinari. Potentially a core option for me, depending on how the rest of things shake out. But yeah, we don't know right now if Gortat is just completely out of the rotation, if he's going to suit up. It's tough without any kind of clarification, but like I think if we get news that he is out or if he's just not gonna be in the rotation, Boban at 4,500 against Karl Anthony Towns. I think Towns might actually shit himself on the floor, like if he has to match up with Boban. Yeah, Boban at 4,500. I love the spot for him. 54. I still kind of like the spot for him, just because we know he's just going to put up monster numbers if he gets the minutes. I like Boban a significant amount if we get that Gortat news early enough. I like pairing him with MONTREZL Harrell. Like you're going to get 48 minutes of center against Karl Anthony Towns with Boban and MONTREZL Harrell. You could pair both of them together. Generally, I don't like pairing two guys that share the same position together, but it's Karl Anthony Towns' defense. It's Minnesota Timberwolves. They're terrible. 118.2 points per game allowed to opponents. I'm sure that's up after last night. I don't even know what the final score was. I just know they got their shit pushed in. So Minnesota, opponent shooting 65% at the rim, 42% in the paint. It's pretty much where all of Harrell's shots come from. Yeah, this is a good spot for both guys. So I have a ton of interest in those three, mostly, Gallinari, Harrell, Boban. Tobias Harris is fine in all formats. You could talk me into some cheap like Patrick Beverly, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, especially over here on DraftKings, 3,700. A little less appealing, 45, 41, but Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, if you think this game blows out, 3,700 for Shai Gilgeous-Alexander in a spot where he would get extended run against a terrible defense. Yeah, I would be overweight on Shai Gilgeous-Alexander in tournaments tonight. But that does it. That's all 9 games. Some interesting stuff to talk about already with injury news coming out. So just make sure we're staying on top of that. And good luck on all your contests. I will be back on Wednesday.